Okay, mark it.
Okay, Mark.
Okay, we're ready.
Okay.
Go on.
Martha, let's just start off talking about your childhood. If you could tell me about your upbringing, where you grew up, and what it was like to be in your family.
I grew up in Nutley, New Jersey, which is a small town about 20 minutes by bus from New York City through the Lincoln Tunnel. And it was a charming residential town with two big corporations. They had Hoffman LaRoche, and which I knew about and was told about. It was a very imposing complex of buildings. And there was also another automatic data systems. And they had a big tower and a swimming pool, the only swimming pool in our town, which was open to children in the summer times for swimming lessons. And of course, I used that pool a lot. But it was a lovely town. I was able to walk to school from elementary school, which was around the corner, Yanticah, to the junior high school, which was in the center of town, about a mile away, and the high school, which was right across the street from the junior high school. So it was that kind of town where everybody knew everybody, even though there were 5 different elementary schools, 4 or 5, I can't remember now for sure. Everybody knew everybody, and everybody finally got together at junior high, which started in the 7th grade. I was one of 6 children. I was second oldest in the line. My mother had children over a period of 19 years. And when the last child, Laura, was old enough to go to kindergarten, Mother started back at her job, which was teaching. She taught 6th grade at the Lincoln Elementary School in Nutley. And she really loved teaching, and she really found it absolutely possible to have 6 kids at home and teach full-time and cook and sew and iron and do all the chores and no help whatsoever, and still maintain a really orderly home. Dad was a pharmaceutical salesman. That was his major job during most of my childhood. He worked for first Pfizer and then another company called Erst. And his district was really New Jersey, northern New Jersey, and New York. But when I needed him to take me somewhere, Dad was available, and I was his favorite child. It's odd to say, but I was definitely his favorite child. My older brother Eric was a little bit more independent, the first to go off to school, to college. And he was an outdoorsman, a sportsman, a hunter, a fisherman. And I was more the homebody type. I was the gardener, the cook, the sewer, the obedient child. I would do pretty much anything my parents asked me to do. And I was also the babysitter. The younger children were very interesting. There was Frank, who was also an independent, not a avid student as much as he was an outdoorsman, a curious thinker, and had a big curiosity. Kathy was the beauty of the family, and she knew it. And she spent a lot of time acting and fantasizing, and she had her own little world up in the attic where she played dress up. But she was a good student, smart, and now grown mother of 2 gorgeous boys, and she went into the teaching profession. Then there was Brother George, who is a builder in Fairfield, married a lovely woman who works at Martha Stewart Living Omnimedia, and he has 2 lovely children, one of whom works at Martha Stewart also in the digital sales department, a gorgeous girl. And then my little sister Laura, Herbert first, when she got married to an actor, the father of her 2 older children. Unfortunately, Kim died when the children were very young, but I introduced Laura to her second husband, Randy Plimpton, and they're happily married and have a 3rd child, who's in college now. So it's that kind of family. Mom was really she was the glue that held everybody together. She had no favorites. Dad died when I was, I think before I was 30 years old, he died. It was a big loss for me because he had not yet seen what I went on to do. So I felt kind of bad that he didn't realize some of my dream. And I know he would have enjoyed it so very much. But he was my best teacher. He taught me everything about gardening. He taught me everything about perfectionism. He taught me everything about doing the very best job you could possibly do. He also always gave me the advice, Martha, you can do anything, which was very positive advice for a young girl at that time. Because instead of saying, oh no, you must be a secretary or maybe a teacher, or he would always say, set your sights high and go for it, which is the best thing you can tell a kid, the best. And he would, as I said, be available for me to answer questions. He explained to me what the scarlet letter meant, for example, when no one else would, because I was an avid reader and going to the library all the time, bringing home all the classics. And when I brought home the Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne, I didn't know what the Scarlet Letter meant. It sounded kind of interesting, but he had to sit down and tell me the sort of the facts of life. But he did it very nicely and very scholarly. And he helped me do research, took me to the New York Public Library, introduced me to the fabulous stacks there, and the research facilities offered by the public library. We did a lot of research on the genealogy of our family too there. Delving back, my dad wrote and spoke Polish and was able to do research in foreign language. So we looked up genealogy, which was way before any of the online genealogy sites existed. And we found out a lot about our family. We would trace it way back to the 9th century. So it was kind of fun. That's the kind of curious mind Dad had. He also was a violinist. He could play anything by ear. He had a beautiful little violin. He hoped that I could have that talent, and I was horrible. Scratchy, squawk, screech, screech. Not good. I played in the orchestra, but I was terrible. I knew it. But others of my family are very good musicians and went on to play instruments and sing. And I can sing, but I can't play. So that's pretty much the kind of household we grew up in. Organic food, homegrown, home caught, home shot, if you wanted to talk about the hunters. But that's the kind of upbringing I had.
What was school like for you? Were grades about your parents' expectations or about your own expectation?
I was a very devoted student. I loved school and I loved my teachers. The other really, other than being told you can do anything, which was very positive, a reinforcement of your own credibility and your own talent, the other thing that I learned from my parents was respect for the teaching profession and for teachers. I cringe now when I hear people complaining about teachers. When I hear all the bad things about teachers' unions and teachers this and teachers that, being brought up by two parents who were licensed teachers. My dad was too, before he had to make more money to raise his kids. That respect and that care for the teacher and what the teacher thought was very, very prevalent in our household.
We're going to move on. College. I just want to touch on that experience for you, what you studied, and you also worked your way through college. Just wanted to hear a little bit about that.
I graduated from Nutley High School. I was high up in my class. I can't remember the number, but it was good. I was not valedictorian. That was Barbara Viventi and oh my gosh, I almost forgot his name. Park Richards. I remember them exactly and how smart they were. And I always admired their prowess in the classroom. We always compared notes as to grades. We were very open with one another about who was learning more, who knew more. It was that kind of class. I took advanced math classes. I was the only girl. I have pictures of me sitting in a room full of boys. And I remember being very active in the literary society. It was the Gauntlet, it was called. That was the school magazine. I did illustrations as well as editing. I remember being on the scholastic committees and on the honor societies. And all of those clubs that don't even exist in a lot of schools these days. So many activities. Now it's sports, 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 much more than it was then. There were lots more academia and a lot more even craft-oriented and art-oriented after-school activities than there are now. And I think children miss that. So if you're not a good soccer player or a good footballer or a good baseball player, what do you do? You know, mom has to find other things for you to do, and it's not so much provided by the schools as it once was. But we had a lot to do in school and out of school. And when I decided that I would go to college, I applied to kind of a diverse group of places. I went to visit Vassar because I heard it was a nice school, but I thought it was a little confining to be in where Vassar was located, up in the Hudson Valley. And I wanted so badly to go to Stanford. I just had this dream of going out to Stanford and making a whole new life. But it was very far across the country, and I had to get a full scholarship. So I was concentrated really on getting into the best school I could in the New York area, which was Barnard College. Columbia at that time did not take women, but we were affiliated closely across the street from Columbia. And I got into Barnard with a scholarship, but small. I got a full scholarship to New York University, but I decided that I thought that Barnard would give me the education I was looking for, so I went there, and it did. It lived up to all my expectations. Having the ability to study at Columbia, utilize all the graduate courses that they were offering. I took lots of advanced art history courses, which was one of my favorite areas of study. Was excellent, and the teaching staff at Barnard and the quality of the students was really extraordinary. My class had amazing students in it, people who have become very famous. Twyla Tharp, the great dancer and choreographer, was in my class. Can you believe that? And also Erica Jong, the novelist, was in my class, writing naughty books, Fear of Flying. And I think practicing what she was going to write about while she was a student at Barnard. And there are lots of others. I could go through the list, but also Martha Stewart.
And you worked during college?
Oh, I modeled during college to supplement my my scholarship. I was lucky. I was pretty enough to be a photography model. I joined the Stewart Model Agency after a short stint at Ford. I just wasn't going to be full-time enough for Ford. So Stewart worked around no relation, by the way, to Martha Stewart. They worked around my schedule at school and got me enough modeling jobs at $50 an hour, which was a lot of money at that time. $250 a day, which sounds like nothing now, nothing. But it was a lot at that time. So I was very, very fortunate and was able to lead kind of a dual existence.
So you were a top student, you were working in 1961, and then you married.
Yeah, I fell in love right when I was at the end of my freshman year. Fell in love with a classmate's brother. She had fixed me up with him. He was a Yale law student at the time. And, after one date, I was kind of smitten. And he was my first real boyfriend. I had other boyfriends, but he was the first real one. And the first one I ever fell in love with. And he wanted to get married. He was ready. Even as a student at Yale Law School, he just wanted to get married. So we got married at the end of my sophomore year.
Were you ready? Did you always have that expectation that you would get married?
No, I never even thought I would get married. I never thought about it. And so when I came home one night and sat my parents down at the kitchen table and said, Mom, Dad, I'm planning to get married, my father was irate, very, very angry at me. He did not want me to get married, especially to, he had met Andy, but he just didn't want me to get married. But they warmed up to the idea and went along with it very nicely.
Was it because you were too young, or they had this vision of your future? Was that?
You have to ask them. Unfortunately, they're not around to ask. But I think that they were just shocked that their student daughter was going to go off and change her life so drastically. And it did change. Marriage changed everything.
What was your expectation at that point for what would happen now that you were married?
Oh, well, I wanted to continue with school, which I did. I commuted from New Haven backwards to New York, which is a very long commute for anybody. It was like 4 hours a day on the train, but it gave me a lot of time to study. And I didn't sleep on the train because if you slept on the train, you ended up in Boston if you fell asleep. So no good to fall asleep. But oh, it was a fantastic life. It was just unbelievably interesting.
So then after college, you went to Wall Street. What drove that? How did that decision come
Well, first came a
about?
baby. First came Alexis. And I continued modeling after college, but my real interest was I had started investing in the stock market. My father-in-law was a stockbroker, and I thought this would be a very interesting career. Either this or go to architecture school because I was very interested in architecture at the same time. But I decided that I would try Wall Street. I interviewed a lot of firms. This is right after I had my only child, Alexis, and interviewed a variety of different firms. I interviewed Merrill Lynch, which had a very excellent training program. I interviewed Parker Redpath, Auchincloss Parker and Redpath, which I don't think exists anymore as a firm, but it was a very stuffy, very proper kind of existence. Small, but good. But then I was introduced to a young firm. Nobody in the firm was over 26 years old, and it was called Perlberg Monness. Two young guys who had built a very fine research firm. It was called a go-go research firm in those days. They're going to cringe when they see this, but it's true. That's what they were known as, and I joined them. They were very, very interested in me and very interested in training me to become an institutional stockbroker, which meant I dealt with large institutional investors like Fidelity Fund in Boston, which at that time was Ned Johnson, and he had just started it and was accumulating the billions and billions of dollars that he was going to turn into the Fidelity Fund family. I had also the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, which was a huge investment fund for the Rockefeller Brothers money. And these are the big brothers, not the brothers that are now, but the Davids and the Lawrences and the Governor Rockefeller, Nelson. So that was that fund. And then I had the Ford Foundation also, which was a large family fund of funds. And I worked with them also. So I had an interesting bunch of people and wealthy individuals who I cultivated as a client. And it was very fun. Hedge funds were just starting. Michael Steinhardt was Steinhardt, Fine and Berkowitz. He's still a friend, a close friend, but he was one of my toughest clients. I learned a lot about how companies worked, how companies grew, how companies failed, and I think I got a very good education being a stockbroker.
What was the environment like? Were there many women, or was it
There were very few women at the time on Wall Street. Uriel Siebert had bought a seat on the New York Stock Exchange. She was my hero. That a woman was able to succeed so well in a totally man's world was very interesting. There were very few women executives of big companies, very few CEOs. And people talked about this imaginary glass ceiling, which I tried to never even think about. I thought that, it's not good to think about hindrances to a career. Think only about the positive. And I was always an optimist. I think I developed my optimism in those days, where I wasn't just a glassy-eyed, starry-eyed person. I was really intensely interested in what I was doing and how things worked and how things got done. And I thought, oh my gosh, this would be great. If I had gone into advertising, I would have been working probably for Mary Wells Lawrence at the time. I remembered even talking to that company thinking, do I do advertising or do I do the stock market? And I really thought that the stock market really gave me the opportunity to meet a lot of people, learn a lot, and also be free enough to have a family.
So given that, was it a big turning point when you left?
When I left the stock market, it was for just a variety of reasons. Commissions were being negotiated, so the big money I had been making was going to be less. I loved making a lot of money as a stockbroker. I thought it was just fantastic. bringing home a great big paycheck, feeling, oh, well, this is a great job. I'm doing a really great job. And every day, remember, when you're a broker, you're starting every day with zero. And nobody tells you that really when you go into the business. And you don't make anything unless you are productive. So I've learned that productivity and doing a job well each and every day is really the best way to build a company. And now it's so different. There's so many people who don't know that. They didn't know it inherently. I think that my education in business and out of business was so intensely good because I learned that productivity could result in great success, could result in great financial gain, and there's some luck probably involved somewhere along the line, if you just happen to make an investment in the right place. But that too took a lot of hard work to ferret out those good investments.
So then the next part of your life, how did the next phase of your career begin?
Well, I left Wall Street because of the negotiated commissions, because I really wanted to spend some time with my daughter, who at the time was about 6 years old and just starting off at elementary school. I really wanted to spend time with her. I really wanted to see what life was like in the suburbs. We had bought an old house in Westport, Connecticut, and my husband was working in Greenwich at the time, commuting to Greenwich. I was commuting to New York. It was a long and kind of dreary commute. And I really wanted to know how to deal with family life. And so I went home. There was also a little glitch in the political scene in America called Watergate. And I remember listening to the hearings on the radio while I painted the entire exterior of my house. I did all the chores around the place, built the gardens, landscaped the property. Pretty fearless about all this stuff, having never really done it on such a big scale. But I just started doing it, and I built the most beautiful gardens, and I built the most wonderful vegetable gardens, and I started small livestock. I joined the Fairfield Organic Gardeners, the only club I think I've ever belonged to, and learned about how to raise a pig, how to raise goats, how to milk goats, how to make cheese. I did the whole thing, and had all those animals on my little 4 acres in Westport. So, but then I got bored within a year and really wanted to start a business, and that's when I started the catering business. That was kind of interesting because it was extremely hard work, which I was used to, extremely long hours, which I was used to, but it involved a kind of creativity that I hadn't really been expressing before. And that gave me the idea that all this stuff that I was doing was so beautiful and so interesting to others as well as to me that I could write a book.
How did you build the business? What was your first catered event? What happened? What did you think about it?
I started with a partner. Why? Just I think out of just friendship. And she was a good cook, but she wasn't a hard worker. And I wanted to grow fast, and she was happy to be small. And she also didn't really like cooking for other people so much. She liked people to come to her house and pick up the dishes, and take home the stuff. I liked going to people's houses and redoing everything and setting up these elaborate parties and weddings and bar mitzvahs and anniversary parties. I loved doing that. I loved making something like a restaurant every single night, creating something new and different. And I built my staff and I built up a clientele. And I didn't just stay in Fairfield County. I moved a lot of my business to New York. Catering lots of huge events at the Metropolitan Museum, at the Cooper Hewitt Museum, the Museum of Modern Art, Sotheby's. Those were all very big and good clients.
When this really started to take off, what did your friends and family think about that?
Well, it took up so much time that I think that that really was sort of the beginning of the demise of my marriage, because I was working so hard and not really paying very close attention to what it was doing to home life. My daughter, she learned how to cook fantastically and how to do all the things, and she was very independent. She kind of got it. And she was off at boarding school at the time, too. She wanted to go to boarding school. But my husband didn't get it quite quite the same way. And I think that really that attention to my job was detrimental to the marriage.
Was there a specific moment where you remember thinking that the sacrifice and the struggle of that balance was making you compromise one in favor of the other?
I'm not a good compromiser, so even though I sort of knew some of the signs, I thought we could work it out. But the night that I came home from a very exhausting event and drove into the driveway, and my husband was sort of hanging out in the back stairs, and he looked at the car coming in the driveway, and I saw him go in and close the door. I knew it was over. That was it. That was the final sign that he usually would come out and say, "Oh, can I help? You know, can I grab your bags?" or something like that. And that was kind of that was a depressing moment.
Was there a click moment, Martha, when you knew you were onto something big, you'd found your niche, and you could really have this impact?
The moment that I knew that I had struck a chord with the American woman was when I published my first book, Entertaining. A book that really could not have happened if I hadn't struggled and worked so hard in the catering business, gardened and restored a beautiful 1805 farmhouse pretty much single-handedly. All that really amazing, creative, hard work paid off in the publication of that first book. That book told a story, it filled a void, it gave other women hope that they could actually entertain nicely with great creativity. And it was a book that I was looking for in the bookstores and didn't exist. And it was a book that I knew many, many people would want. So I wrote that book, and I found my voice as a writer. And this is in 1982, so I was already in my 40s. And to become a writer when you're in your 40s, that's kind of late to discover that you're a writer. But since then, since 1982, I and in my company have published 71 books. That's a lot of books, a lot of good writing. I have started seven fantastic magazines. We publish 4 very popular magazines now with the readership in many millions a month. And so that one book gave me a voice, made me realize I had a voice, and made me realize that I struck a chord with a very big portion of the American public.
What was the chord? What was it about what you were doing that women were really responding to?
I think what I did was make homekeeping, homemaking, housekeeping, all those deadly words, I made them an art form. And I think that that's really what happened. I think people realized, I don't have to work in the kitchen today, I have to cook. So they changed the verbs from have to do something or work in the laundry room or have to do that laundry to oh, I have fantastic, I have the laundry to do. I'm just going to have a great time. I'm going to learn how to iron ruffles. It was just a different way of looking at things that women had been doing for centuries, or having other people do for centuries. That was more considered drudgery than joy.
When people talk about you reinventing the role of the 50s housewife for modern women, how were you trying to appeal to both homemakers and to career women?
I knew that women were going back to work in droves. I had done it. I had been very successful doing it. I thought I could have it all. I thought I could have the family, have the home, have the garden, have the husband. And you realized after a while that there are sacrifices to be made and there are time constraints. But when I was doing it, and I keep making this point and nobody is picking up on it as much as they should, I think, there was no computer. In 1982, I bought my first computer, an IBM. I went to the IBM store on Madison Avenue and bought a computer. That absolutely changed my life, as it changed everybody else's life. So I had realized already that women wanted it all. They wanted balance. They wanted challenge. They wanted a job. They wanted to make money. They wanted to be treated as well as anybody, as well as the man next door. And I had done it. I had done it. I had succeeded in New York. I had succeeded commuting. I had succeeded doing all those things. But I also realized that home was a really great place, and family was a really great thing, and gardening and doing everything that really fell under that title of living was very, very fascinating and very acceptable. And I started to think, well, there's so many subjects involved in just making a home. Maybe I'll write a book about all of them, or a book about each of them, many books. And then I thought, that's not the really best format, because a book it comes out and then it has a lifespan. It could last a long time, but it's not as good as a magazine format. And I got very interested in creating a magazine called Living, and that was in about 1988. And I virtually sold the idea to Time Inc. We became partners in Martha Stewart Living, and within a very short time, publishing our first issue in 1990, and it was an instant success. Just like entertaining was an instant success, and all my books following. I wrote a book a year. I kept up very carefully with a schedule of productivity again, and realized that being productive, being persistent, being very creative, and all centered upon home-centric was a very good thing. And that's when the company idea started.
I just wanted to touch really briefly on your book on entrepreneurship. What was the impetus or the inspiration to write that book?
Well, because I've had such an interesting career, and I have been touted as one of America's entrepreneurs, and I was the first, I think, and I'm not sure for certain, but I think I was the first self-made woman billionaire. When I went public with my Martha Stewart Living Omnimedia stock. I think that my spirit of entrepreneurial initiative warranted a book. And it was published by Rodale. It was published in big numbers. A lot of people are still buying it, still reading it. And it's called The Martha Rules. And I think it's very helpful because I simplify the idea of being an entrepreneur. I try to make it clear what it takes to be an entrepreneur. I go through the processes of becoming an entrepreneur and finding that passion, finding that idea, making that idea come to fruition. It's the same for everybody. Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Howard Schultz with Starbucks, those dreams, that passionate dream that turns into a real idea that actually comes to a reality with very hard work and investment of either people, physical investment, or money investment. It just helps change the way people look, think, work, be. All of that is entrepreneurial. And so I wrote the book.
And for kids, is Martha and Friends sort of the kid answer to that same?
Well, Martha and Friends is little Martha being a business-like kid. There's a commercial on television right now with that little girl who has her little checklist and she's running around being an entrepreneur. I love that commercial. I don't even know what the commercial is for, but it's a great commercial because that child and her friends have taken over the world. And that's what entrepreneurs do. Entrepreneurs take a little idea, a germ of an idea, and take over the world.
What are you excited about right now? You have a 30-year anniversary and something coming.
No, 20th anniversary.
It's 20th?
Oh, yes. The magazine will be 20 years old, is 20 years old in The magazine will be 20 years old in 2011, the end of this year, with a December issue. And I am so excited about that because when you look back, and we don't look back much as a company, but we like to look forward. But when we've put together a special edition celebrating 20 years of creativity, of ideas. When you look back at what we have done with story ideas, with photography, with subject matter, you will see what a huge impact we've had on so much in the American home. So much. There are so many brilliant ideas that have been created at our company, and I'm very, very proud of that.
What did you think of the women's movement? Were you part of it?
I think I've always been part of the women's movement just by my own business and my own development in the world. But I've never really perceived myself as the feminist about, breaking through the glass ceiling. That's not been my job, or it hasn't been the moving force behind what I've done. I just never thought about it seriously enough to take a strident voice in that movement. And by strident, I don't mean too loud a voice, but a strong voice. I really just went along merrily in my own way and made a successful company, and influenced a lot of people. But I think feminism, I think the feminist movement has been absolutely important to the promotion of women as equal in this society. In politics, in business, in life. I think it's a very, very important thing that we consider ourselves equal. I never considered myself an unequal. And I think that it's hard because we're not always taught how strong we can be. We're not always taught how productive we can be as women. But I think that as you view things that go on in other countries, the oppression that still exists against women in many places, and the breakout that has happened in many places, I applaud and salute and just glorify those people who are still doing it, still finding the struggle exists.
Going back to what was happening in the 60s, do you think it was problematic that they may have gone too far in downplaying the importance of the homemaker and those responsibilities at a time when you were thinking to uplift it or elevate
Well,
it?
I never really thought about it. It didn't irritate me. It didn't, nothing. I just looked from the sidelines and let them do their thing as they let me do my thing. And if it's a struggle, if it's that doesn't involve homemaking, but homemaking is at the heart of it all. Homekeeping, homemaking is at the heart of our lives. We all live somewhere. We all sleep somewhere. I think that's called home, and hopefully, and we have our families around us, hopefully, and it's very, very central to who we are and what we do.
What do you think is the biggest change for women since you were young?
I think what my father told me is you can do anything. Has really come to be a mantra for many, many women. Women are now astronauts. Women are now pilots. Women are now deep sea divers. Women are athletes, tremendously excellent athletes. Women are playing professional baseball. Women are going to military academies. The change in the attitude towards women has been dramatic in the 20th century. And now in the 21st century, it's hard to believe that there ever was a movement called the suffragette movement. It's hard to believe that that happened, but it did. And it had to start somewhere. And that it did is excellent, and that it succeeded is fantastic.
Given all that success, why do you still think many young American women today consider feminism to be some sort of dirty word?
Again, I haven't talked to a lot of young women about feminism. Maybe I should, but I think that when I read bloggers and tweets from young people, they all realize that life is complex. Life is very different for them than it was for their moms or their grandmoms, and they have to, but they still have to know things. They realize that. They're always asking me questions, always ask, and I'm always happy to answer a question about anything that has to do with the home, with living. I think that kids need to be taught. I think that the younger generation cannot just exist with information from their computer. That's not the only way to find out things. You have to experience things firsthand. You have to actually do things with your hands. You actually, it's not just all animated games on your laptop or on your handheld device, whatever that is. It isn't that. That's not real life. Real life is seeing and doing and experimenting and making and baking. It's all those things that we can never forget.
You've been quoted as saying, "My life is my business and my business is my life." Do you think that's sort of what it takes to succeed in the way that you have? Why don't we see more women in the boardroom?
I don't think that that's necessary in everybody's case, that to make your life your business and your business your life. Remember, I built a company. I feel very responsible for my company, a company which I still have a very vast ownership in. And I want that company to be very successful, to grow very big, to leave a legacy of basically of what that company stands for. So I don't think that has to be the standard, and I don't think I would ever say I've set the standard for women's behavior. But I think that what I've done encourages other women to try to break out from maybe a job that they might consider ordinary and try something new, to try to balance their lives better with home and family and job, to experiment, to certainly do it yourself. Do it yourself is a big thing, and it's bigger and bigger every year all over the world. I understand that in Japan, because of as a result of the horrible tsunami and the nuclear problems that they've had, that crafting has burgeoned in Japan. That's do it yourself. Take pride in something that you can actually spend time making yourself. That's important, I think. And for people to rediscover the handmade and the homemade is just part of a good life.
Do you think it's easier to be a woman or a man in today's world, given all that women have to balance in addition to the desire to have a career?
I think it's much better to be a woman.
What's the most meaningful and useful piece of advice you've ever received?
Be creative. Express yourself. Do what you think is right.
What's the one piece of advice you would give to a young woman on building a career?
Go with your gut. If you feel good about an idea, work on that idea, and until it works or doesn't work.
A sort of pithy piece of advice on the work-life balance.
Well, one thing that you shouldn't be afraid of is change. And so many people are fearful of change. Change is good. Change is good, change is modern, change is evolutionary. And it doesn't have to be drastic, but little changes in your behavior, in your job, in what you do every single day is certainly a good thing.
And how about a piece of advice on raising a child?
Don't think the child knows best. Be a really good guide to a child. The more information you impart to that kid, the better. And the more, and children want to learn. That's all, I just know how much they want to learn. And the more you give them, more challenges, the more information, the more input you have. Personally, I'm not talking about off a computer screen. But personal interaction and information is extremely important in the development of a young person.
Well, we know what you wound up doing, but what did you want to be when you grew up?
A teacher.
Accomplishment you're most proud of?
Building my company and having a family.
What 3 adjectives best describe you?
Curious, curiouser, more curious.
What person that you've never met has had the biggest influence on your life?
Maybe the person who first made a loaf of bread.
Your mother passed away in 2007, but she certainly had a chance to see your groundbreaking successes. What was her reaction to the extraordinary life that you created for yourself?
We had a very odd relationship, my mom and I. Even though she knew what I did, she never focused on the success part of it. She loved the results. She loved that the books were there. I don't think she ever focused on how much work a book took, because she had a very strong work ethic herself. And so hard work was just part of our upbringing. We didn't think twice about working 20 hours a day. And that just was part of our upbringing. So, mom just thought I was just an ordinary girl.
This is the lightning round. I give you 2 words and you tell me which one best describes you. iPad or notepad?
iPad.
Early bird or night owl?
Early bird.
Spontaneous or methodical?
Spontaneous.
Diplomat or direct?
Direct.
Type A or easygoing?
Oh, type A.
Higher math score, higher verbal score?
Higher verbal.
Patient or impatient?
Impatient.
Prada or Gap?
Prada Gap.
Prepare or cram?
Cram.
Domestically skilled or domestically challenged?
Oh, skilled, of course.
10 minutes early, 10 minutes late?
10 minutes late.
Book smart or street smart?
Book smart.